I'm delighted to be here. I'm also delighted that you are here after all the dancing, drinking, and dining. Yeah. So, and if you, I will try to speak a bit low, so that maybe if you choose to relax, I will not disturb you too much. Well, I will give you, let's say, an introduction on the not only the 30th anniversary of the framework program, but maybe also about the whole history of European research, which is in fact 60 years, yeah, about 60, just about 60 years. So, which is interesting, and so, but on the other side, it will also be a challenge for me to cope with this, with all this, with the 60 years on 68 slides in 60 minutes, so quite some challenges ahead, yeah? So, but the chair will stop me. So this is an outline, but you will be surprised when it becomes real. So, well, I would like to start with something which probably not many people of you know of the EARMA members, and this is looking back 19 years. 19 years ago, and this was about when I started the Bureau for International Research and Technology Cooperation to support the framework program, I realized very quickly, also some time ago, already in the University Extension Center dealing with international research and technology cooperation, that the management of networks and of distributed consortia is something very important. And I was at that time, I was a Kellogg visiting fellow at the University of Oxford, and together with this university, with the BIT, which was mentioned, the BIT, and with Acreo, I organized this conference. It was the first conference on the management of collaborative European programs and projects in research, education, and training. So, and it was a great experience with some 350 participants. This was more or less also the startup conference of the fourth framework program, and there were very important people who were participating, the former president of the Commission, Roy Jenkins, but also Pierre Aigrin, one of the pioneers of European research, Paolo Fasella, Fricka from the European Science Foundation, and others and others. So there were about, so we had 30 keynote speakers, everybody on top of European research, and some 70 papers in 20 parallel sessions. And I think this was an inspiration, and Mr. Letov, I don't see him today, yeah? He confirmed it yesterday. This was an inspiration for starting EARMA. In the same year, the first group of people met, I think in Genoa, and then EARMA went on. And I'm really absolutely glad and pleased and delighted that this is going on so successfully. So this is just for the introduction. I will not spend 2 minutes for each slide, because then the other morning sessions would be endangered. Well, some talk, and very short, everything has to be very short, about different aspects of the context. Well, first of all, the European treaties. You see, there is a long row of European treaties, and already in the first treaty on the European coal and steel community, research played an important role. So research was on the agenda of Europe from the beginning. We have then Euratom, also the European Economic Community, where so not only we had steel, we had nuclear energy, but also agriculture came in. And then, but this was based just on the assumption, or let's say the basic notion, that research and development are important for the competitiveness of industry, because in fact the community had no legal basis to deal with research and technology. That happened only in the Single European Act, and then this was strengthened also through Amsterdam, where there was the possibility for a qualified majority, so it made decisions on the framework program much easier. And then finally Lisbon, where again research is strengthened because it is now the task of the Commission to realize the European research area. There is the timeline of all the accessions and all the membership, and I'm very glad that since 3 days a country is member of the European Union which bears my name, because my name is Hrvat, is Croat, and so it's the country is Horvatian. Okay, but this is quite nice, but this was just a joke, sorry. There are also other interesting events. If you look, and of course there is much more on technological development, but it shows also, let's say, a shift, and we will deal later on about that, a shift and a transition of the fabric, of the global fabric of research, science research and technology. Well, in October 1957 there was Sputnik, and in 1961 the first manned space flight, Yuri Gagarin, so this was Soviet Union. So that meant a real shock for the United States, and some of you, well, not many probably, will remember that. I remember certainly, yeah. And so, but then we had in 1969, we had Apollo 11 and 2 astronauts on the moon. But I think we have to look also what happened in the last few years and what is taking place now. A total change in the global landscape of science, research and technology. And for instance, in 2003, the first Chinese national was in space. But there is another event. 2008, many of you will relate to the economic crisis, but there were very interesting articles, for instance, in the New York Times, and also President Obama said the fact that in 2008 the Chinese government decided that green China, that renewable energy, environmental protection is a new priority for China, that this is a new Sputnik shock, yeah? But the difference is that the first Sputnik shock was about competition, but now it's very much about cooperation. Competition and cooperation. And this will be something we will come back later. So, the first 30 years, don't be afraid, I will not go into all the details. But what I would like to show with 2 or 3 slides is that this was a very complex, a tedious, a cumbersome process where in fact one must say and one must acknowledge the Commission played a very important role. So developing the, let's say, the awareness that research, that cooperation is something important. Well, I mentioned some of these things here already, like Euratom and so on. The green lines are structures for cooperation in certain area, but this was not community initiatives, this was mainly intergovernmental initiatives. But you see, in 1965, a committee was formed, and this was already discussing towards coordinating science and technology policies of the member states. So there were some ideas were there, but the member states were very reluctant to, well, there were 2 things. First of all, they were very much concentrated on national interest, yeah? Also, by the way, on national champions, so that were not so easy to make them collaborate. And on the other side, they had also some doubts to give the task of coordination to the Commission. But in 1968, the Aigrin report, I mentioned Pierre Aigrin, who was in Oxford, but he has also other important things, I will say, where he contributed. In the report, already 7 areas for collaboration and 47 more detailed proposals were made for coordination of activities. That did not mean already cooperation between, let's say, universities, industry across borders. The research activities were still mainly, I forgot to mention that, related to Euratom, where with the Joint Research Center, I forgot to mention that, sorry, the Joint Research Center, and with some contracts with individual institutions, organizations, but no cooperation so far. Then at the summit, there were also some summits in the following about coordinating research and technological development, and also some supplementary programs. So more or less the stage was prepared for cooperation, but then in 1970 COST was started, but it was intergovernmental. This was intergovernmental and not community. So this was, in fact, a kind of backlash. But as you know, COST is still around. And by the way, Pierre Agrain was also one of the fathers of COST. So let's go on. So there are 2 important commissioners to be mentioned, and this was in 71, Spinelli. He really emphasized the point, and this was a driving force in the next, in the coming time, about the technological gap. Yeah, people realized that Europe is falling behind the US and also Japan, and there is a need for centralized community action in science and technology, and also cooperation. So now trans-border cooperation came to the agenda and was on the agenda, but it still took quite some time. In Paris, an action plan for common science and technology policies was launched, let's say, to be established by 1st January 74. But then another very important commissioner came, Dahrendorf, and the Dahrendorf plan for research for improving the quality of life and strengthening European industry, and also introducing an initiative called FAST, Foresight and Assessment of Science and Technology, because people saw we have to plan ahead, we have to look ahead, we have to look into the future. But the community, the Joint Research Center was changed. There were many things to say about the Joint Research Center. We don't have the time now, but changed into a multi-purpose tool of the community, so supporting community activities, and the community activities should be mainly through indirect action. You know, joint research action is direct action by the European Commission, and everything else, everything what you are doing is indirect actions. Well, some people have sometimes a bit problems with the Euro speech, but I'm sure you know about it. 74 was extremely important because there 4 council resolutions were made, and one was the foundation of CREST, yeah? And then the European Science Foundation. But this was thought as a kind of European National Science Foundation following the US example, but as you know, which never became true in this form, but also community science policy and again forecasting. I have to move on. Now we have already a start now for collaborative research. There were in the 70s, several community R&D activities in the area of raw materials. That was very important. Energy was high on the agenda, but also agriculture, water, environment, natural resources. And then in 79, there the idea came about the program that we need to do something in the IT sector. This was, on the one side, supported by the Big 12, which were existing at that time, because they saw we are falling back compared to the United States and Japan. And there were the ideas about, and this is really now, I mean, I would say the raw material sector, which later became Bright, and ESPRIT, the European Strategic Research, strategic program for research and information technology, these were really the key programs where people learned together. But don't think that was so easy. Yeah? Because first the Commission talked with the research managers of the Big 12, but they say, well, to collaborate with our competitors would not be so easy. And then they talked with the top management, and gradually the idea was born about the ESPRIT pilot phase. But I can tell you this is a very interesting experience, and Pierre Aigret, for instance, told me that this was a difficult issue because although it was decided to have this pilot action, this pilot phase, and so they saw we have to work together, they didn't really believe in it. And Aigret told me that Siemens in Munich, so this was a collaborative, there were big collaborative projects with France, with UK and with others, but Siemens in Europe, in Munich, had, without telling their partners, had departments working, doing all the work packages what the partners were supposed to do because they didn't believe they could do it. So, and it was a surprise. It was a surprise, and it was a very positive surprise. And then, of course, ESPRIT became one of the largest programs. So, summing up the first 30 years, oh, it's okay. Well, first of all, we have the integration process, yeah, from 6 to 12 members. I showed you this slide. A long-term reluctance of member states agreeing on community influence and also on research and development going beyond the joint research center. The member states, as I said, protected their national interests, and national research and policies, research policies prevailed. Well, to a certain extent, maybe we should look how much this has changed, but this was a skeptical remark, sorry. We have to be positive today. And they protected the national champions. But then there was the famous book, Le Défi Américain, about the technological gap and the initiatives of Spinelli, Dahrendorf, and later Davignon, I will say about that, about coordination and cooperation. And the member states increasingly, reluctantly, but increasingly became aware that it is necessary to work together. And the positive experiences in ESPRIT, and I will come back to that a bit later because this was very interesting. At that time, I mentioned that European industry did not collaborate because they were all competitors, and they did what? But they collaborated with American partners. So, and this was quite then a change that happened, and I will come back to that, that now gradually European research and development cooperation, let's say, was strengthened. Now the 30 years for the framework program. So, I made 30 years in the first 20 minutes, quite fine, but now it comes into detail. Now, okay, I will show you, gives you just an overview of the different framework programs and their timing. There were, first of all, there were also some a bit overlapping. If you look, for instance, second and third framework program, there were important events, bodies established, like I mentioned CREST already. CREST played all the time an important role, but then in 1984, IRDAC, and then the foundation of the Joint Research Center. Then IRDAC was replaced by ESTA, and the follow-up institutions and advisory boards I will show you. And then some very important events like the Lisbon strategy and the European research area, which is still on the agenda, and we are grappling with that. The 6th framework program, 7th framework program, there you see many changes, the Ljubljana process, so the ERA initiatives, and of course the European Research Council, the Strategic Forum for International Cooperation, the SFIC, the High-Level Group for Joint Programming, Europe 2020, and now we are going towards the Horizon 2020. I have to make now a short remark. In the last few days, in the last, let's say, 10 days, when I prepared these slides, yeah, which in no way are perfect, don't expect too much, but I felt in a certain way like a European research archaeologist, yeah, digging for data, for documents, and for instance, it's extremely difficult to find something about the first framework program. Of course, there are some works like Guzzetti and Michel André and others, but still it is very difficult. And what is extremely difficult, and therefore probably you might be disappointed at some time, to find data. I called many people who should have the data in the Commission. Nobody could tell me about the number of participations of the first, second, third framework program. Nobody knows. It's a great secret. So maybe, yeah, okay, it's very difficult. So don't expect too much. So now the first framework program. And I hope you appreciate to see something like that because it's not easy to find. I found it in a very interesting report published by the UK Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology, and you find also something in Guzzetti. Well, look at that. The first framework program now, it is 3,750 million ECU, or 3.75 billion, so it's a small program. And as I will say on the next slide, it was called the first framework program. I would say it was more a framework than a program. It was a framework where these activities, which I very shortly showed you before, which were launched in the years before by different directorates, by different DGs, not coordinating, overlapping, and so on, but they were put under one umbrella. Following these ideas of the commissioners that I mentioned, that there has to be a centralized management for European research. And you see there the very strong focus, almost 50% on energy, yeah, and then promoting industrial competitiveness. There are some activities on agriculture, stepping up. Development aid was in from the beginning, then safety and health, protecting some aspects on the environment, and also improving the effectiveness of the community science and technology potential. And there, I think there were already also activities for human potential. So the main active, well, what we now call everybody knows, we call it now instruments. I think we still call it instruments, or maybe activities, I don't know. Everything is changing all the time, so we are now going to Eurospeech 8.0. Okay, collaborative project and concerted actions. And that is very important, that the Council and the Commission, they discussed about, okay, how should we select areas to where we will collaborate? And these are the famous Riesenhuber. Riesenhuber was I knew him, yeah? He was a German science minister, and he developed the criteria. I will not read all that. You can read it at home before going to sleep. Yeah, so there were different criteria to justify community activity. Research conducted on such a vast scale that a single member state couldn't do it. Then also, let's say, a financial advantage to do it together with respect to scale and scope. And then, of course, also research that has to be conducted on particular because of geographical aspects, like, for instance, environment, yeah. And also, that's interesting, research which contributes to the cohesion of the common market and which promotes the unification of European science and technology, and also the establishment of uniform laws and standards. By the way, I think the last point there, the unification of European science and technology, I think it was even broader. Again, in a discussion with Pierre Aigrin, he told me, well, in fact, the ideas, the first ideas on working together in research was very much also support European integration. And I would say also in my personal activity, my personal experience, some years of experience, I must say that I fully subscribe to that. I worked heavily with the now new member states already since the beginning of the 90s, or later on, starting at the end of the 90s, with the Western Balkan countries, because it is really my conviction that the science and technology has the role of an avant-garde, in the best meaning of the word, for working together and for coming closer together and finally for integration. So let's go on. You see the next wonderful slide about the second framework program. Has everybody, by the way, seen before slides about first and second framework program? Yeah, sure, of course. Okay, some. Okay. I would say a minority, a very important minority, but okay. So, and there you see, again, you see now a very strong emphasis on information and communication technology. Yeah? Less, so it is reducing the percentage of energy. Modernization of industrial sector is still very important. And what you see here very important acronyms, you know, the community, and I like acronyms. Yeah? You see ESPRIT, RACE, DRIVE, Delta, AIM, EURET, BRIGHT, EURAM, FOREST, and so on, and so on. The new things were biotechnology, BRIDGE, then marine science and technology, and also value, first time a program especially for dissemination and transfer of results. There was also a predecessor, I was involved in value, by the way. There was also a predecessor program, Sprint, yeah, and I mean, it would be interesting, there was not time enough to look at all these initiatives that were going on since the 80s in the area of dissemination of results of technology transfer and also the move towards innovation. We could learn about it, and I'm afraid we have a certain deficit, so with respect to institutional memory. Not many people are even remembering that there were already quite some important activities in the priorities that we are now setting. So the criteria was strengthened, were extended, were extended towards also the promotion of harmonious and widespread development. So the third framework program, everything goes quite quickly. You see here, what we see here is an increase in life sciences. Yeah? There is an increase, is more life sciences than in the past programs. There is still a very strong emphasis on information technology and of course on the industrial and materials technology, and for instance for the specialists, for the gourmands of European research, that was not, the two programs, BRIGHT, EURAM, were BRIGHT and EURAM were merged into BRIGHT EURAM, but this is just for the, as I said, for the gourmands, or gourmet, I don't know, yeah. So, okay, let's go on. And there, but this is now interesting because the criteria again were adapted, and there were two aspects. Well, first of all, industrial competitiveness, but then the concept of course, there were people who were saying, okay, but how about competition and so on, and competition rules, you know, we have the competition ayatollahs also in the commission. So, I mean, this is also quite an important topic. So, and Davignon, Commissioner Davignon, defined this concept of pre-competitive research. Yeah? Whatever, it was always vague, yeah? But it was very strong. I remember that in the third framework program, when we really joined the framework program, I mean Austria joined the framework program under the heading of the European Economic Area. So we all, pre-competitive, very interesting. So it was a bit vague, and the Commission was very wise, step by step over the year, to let it fade away. Now nobody's talking about pre-competitive research anymore, but there was also pre-normative research, because people saw it's very important to get, to have a lead also in standardization, because this is of course very important for global competition. So modify the attitude of industrial operators. I told you, that it was not self-understood that collaboration is excellent, so to orient them towards transnational initiatives. By the way, also there was the idea of transnational mergers and all this. Training of staff, extremely important, but also safeguarding the environment and the quality of life. A new thing was, and this is interesting for you, I'm sure, is that this was also the birth of craft. Yeah, the new scheme for SMEs, I don't go in all the details, you see them here, but for you it might be interesting, and maybe there are also some national contact points, because there's, in the third framework program, the craft focal points for SMEs were established, because it was, it became, the people in charge became aware that SMEs need some support to find their way through the labyrinth of, or through the complexities, at least perceived complexities of collaborative research. So the craft focal points were initiated there. Now we go to the fourth framework program, so we move forward. Again, you see that there are new aspects coming in, like transport, and also targeted socioeconomic research. Targeted socioeconomic research, this was a very interesting innovation in the framework program. By the way, I was the chair of the first 5 years assessment of targeted socioeconomic research. There were already since many years from the Council of Europe, from the European Science Foundation, also from the Commission, were ideas how to integrate social sciences, and then, okay, the, how do you say, the elephant gave birth to a mouse. So there, the targeted socioeconomic research program was implemented in the framework program, and you see, I mean, it's a bit more than 1% of the budget. But it was a very important move in my view, and I will come back to that. Also, at the, in the mobility of researchers, there the fellowship, Marie Curie Fellowship Association was established. An interesting aspect came in through the Maastricht Treaty, namely that also all the research activities deemed necessary by virtue of other chapters of the treaty, it's a very nice sentence, are a task of the framework program. So, or maybe in more common language, so support of other EU policies, not only competition, not only industry, but in fact all policies. Now, and am I right? Yeah. So, and but there was also another new feature. Some people tend to forget about it, because in the fourth framework program, also demonstration was integrated. And by the way, this is the reason why we are talking now not on research and development, R&D, but RTD, but the D is for demonstration. Yeah, many people have forgotten that in the meantime. And this was especially relevant in the energy program, and the thermi were the big demonstration actions. And based on the positive experience with the craft focal points, the network of national contact points was established in the fourth framework program, and guidelines for setting up NCP system were developed, and all of you probably know that it goes on now. I remember I was involved in in defining these guidelines. I mentioned already socioeconomic research. I should also mention the European Technology Assessment Network, which was established, and I mentioned already the MC Fellowship Association. The activities, and I just give an example, they were still quite the same like at the beginning. There were shared cost actions. These are the collaborative projects. Then there were the technology stimulation measures for SMEs, craft, thematic networks. Networks were always very important, where not research is funded, but the coordination, the exchange of information of research, and I think this is still a very important activity, and I hope something like that will also be in the next framework program. And then different kind of accompanying measures like studies, like conferences, and so on, and of course the training grants, very important. Now the fifth framework program, that's very interesting, because this was under the famous Commissioner Edith Cresson, yeah, who had quite an influence later on the further development of the framework program. I will make a remark about that. And she said the fifth framework program is a break from the past. So she was the first to say that, others followed. So, and the objectives was, and this is very interesting now looking at Horizon 2020, the objective was to address major European challenges and problems. Yeah? Something is mentioned here, the quality of life, globalization, market opportunities, sustainable development, the European paradox of innovation, where we say we are world master in publication, but not necessarily in exploitation of results, and also a strong focus on impact. Yeah? So, and I think that's very interesting. In my view, Framework 5 was an excellent program, very interesting, because through to the focus on the challenges, there was also a focus on interdisciplinary cooperation and of integrating social sciences and humanities more or less in most of the projects, which was a big difficulty at the beginning, but later on, in my view, worked quite well. Yeah, so moving, now look at that, it's interesting, it's some time ago, but moving from a technology to an innovation program, integrating technology push and technology pull, and also science and technology at the service of the citizens. The main innovation, and you see there let's say these challenges, quality of life and management of living resources. It's not about life sciences and technology, it's about quality of life and management of living resources. The user-friendly information society, competitive and sustainable growth, and then environment and sustainable development and energy. And the main information, and then horizontal activities. But the main innovation or innovative aspect of the program was this concept of key actions, of generic and enabling research and technology activities, and of activities supporting European research infrastructure. And you see that was in each of the challenges you had these three activity lines, which were very interesting because the key actions linked really major economic and social program focused on solutions and deliverables, and also taking a systems approach, interdisciplinary cooperation, and so on. And the generic enabling technologies, of course, supporting all that, but also a realization and an awareness that the infrastructures are extremely important. And there you have the horizontal programs like specific measures. Again, now you have it very importantly here to support other EU policies and also coordination of and support of respective activities in the thematic program related to international cooperation, innovation, researchers, and socioeconomic aspects. So now I can tell you a nice story, yeah? Because this is the sixth framework program, and surprisingly you have again a break from the past. And I must say, you know, I mentioned the role of Edith Cresson, And Edith Cresson, you know, that was this crisis where the Commission had to resign. And in my view, we are still, I would say, suffering from the consequences of that, because that led really to red tape and so on. And this was not initiated by the Commission, but by the Court of Auditors. And read this today. Yeah? The Court of Auditors say red tape, but in my view, they are very much also behind it, as the Council, as well as the Parliament. I have to say that. This was caused by the Cresson catastrophe, I would say. Yeah? But the interesting thing was that I invited Philippe Busquin also at the beginning of the 6th Framework Program, and the funny thing was, it's somewhere in my, I have it somewhere in my archive. Unfortunately, I didn't find it. He used exactly the same slide as Edith Cresson about the break from the past. I have this slide, but I didn't find it. So this was quite nice. This is, by the way, also a certain characteristic of the European research, that we always need, every 4 or now 7 years, we need a break from the past. But in this case, of course, I mentioned it before, there was the focus now on towards the European research area. And as you have seen in the past, in the other framework programs, there was this focus on competitiveness, on quality of life, on environment. This is still there, but now we have a higher political level objectives, namely, in this case, the European research area. And the idea was to have the strategic approach, integrating the European research area by very large initiatives. Yeah? And in fact, at the beginning, Philippe Busquin had the idea. He said, okay, the Commission is managing some 15,000 or so contracts, or even more probably. Yeah? I would like to reduce this to 1,000, just 1,000 contracts, but very big one. So these were the integrated project and network of excellence. They were a bit, let's say, slimmed down, but still were very big. Another new thing was the new and emerging science and technology, a kind of predecessor already to activities in ERC, but not really, because this was really collaborative research, but a focus on basic research, on high-risk research, forward-looking, so very important activity. Then collective research for SMEs, and of course different activities structuring ERA. And also new, so there were many new things, coordinating research policies and programs, the ERANETs. At the same time, this is not a part of the framework program, the open method of coordination was introduced, and European technology platforms. I have to make a remark, I have to look at the watch, and I have to make a remark. When Busquin said towards the European research area, in coordinating national policies, I said, oh God, this will never work. Because I was a member of CREST ad hoc group for the CREST ad hoc groups for the coordination of national policies under the first framework program, which was in my, not the framework program, but this coordinating working groups, ad hoc group, this was a disaster, because it was obvious that the member states didn't want to tell each other what they are doing. So it was very strange. They offered reports and so, but in the end, nothing was in. I was in the innovation program, the rapporteur. There it was quite good, because people could learn about from each other, but in the real technology and science program, there was no coordination. So for me, also later on as a chair of the first ERANET evaluation, this was really a surprise that this became a success, no doubt about that. So this shows you, gives you the overview. I cannot go into all detail, but I mentioned also from a topical point of view, space came new into it. So the 7th framework program, we are moving on, and I have only 12 minutes to go. Okay, the 7th framework program, this was now again, and even at a higher level, political objective, namely supporting the Lisbon strategy. And, of course, strengthening the science and technology base of European industry, and also international competitiveness, and so on. There, absolutely important new development, the European Research Council, because it was for the first time, it was not about transnational collaboration. So the European added value was not transnational collaboration, but transnational European competition towards excellence. And as you know, the ERC grants, they don't have to move, and most of them, by the way, also don't move, yeah, from one place to another. The ERANET Plus, also regional aspect, but then the new things, joint technology initiatives, and the risk-sharing facilities, and also joint programming initiative. So many new activities supporting both the Lisbon strategy, but also the European research area. And at the political level, we had the important documents and policy initiatives, Europe 2020, we have them, and they are now very on the agenda till 2020, the Innovation Union, ERA partnership, and so on. So you see it here. So now, what is new for the framework program to come for Horizon 2020? I didn't say 8 framework program. So Horizon 2020, and I don't have to say much about that because Peter gave an excellent speech about that. I am very glad to have a radically simplified costing model. Many people didn't believe that this will become true, but I think this is really almost a revolution, and this is perfect. And I would like to congratulate the Commission that she succeeded in that. So I think that will be important. That will be important with many aspects, with, of course, with in general for all, but it will also be a stimulus for industry to, let's say, to come back or to become stronger in the framework program. You see here the general structure, about 70,000 million EQ, and I had in pale, because I don't know where this will be, the new aspects like a fast track to innovation and dedicated measures to wider participation. I have to say also something about the EIT, which is now part of the framework program. I have to be short. In my view, the EIT is a very, very interesting initiative. I think all of us, and of course the most important people, the Commission, the governing board, everybody has still to spend quite some thoughts about to realizing really this first new institution supporting the knowledge triangle. The knowledge and innovation communities, these are very interesting new, let's say, forms of collaboration because they combine the proximity of regional cooperation and regional innovation systems with the transnational aspect of collaborating with other co-location centers in other regions. And I think this is very interesting, and we should support it, but also spend some thought because this is a new hybrid virtual institution which might really be something for the 21st century. So, and maybe MIT is something old-fashioned. So, okay, but I didn't say anything. So, now some aspect of the development now. Over the years, over these 60 or 30 plus 30 years, research and development and innovation have moved to central stage. We have, of course, the growth of the framework program budget. We move from pre-competitive, pre-innovative research to research development, demonstration and innovation. We have, and this is really something that has to be emphasized, developed a real advanced evaluation culture, both at the level of the programs and at the level of project selection. This is really something of worldwide best practice. I was in many workshops with Americans. I talked to American evaluators, but also evaluators from other parts of the world. This is really something excellent. Yeah? from supporting networks, collaborative projects, to supporting principal investigators, integrating new areas, involving increasing numbers of countries, yeah, from 6 member states to 28, plus the associated countries, the broadening of the portfolio of instruments, especially also with regard to the ERA instrument. The participation of industry remains still an issue, yeah, but it would need quite some time also to discuss this in detail, and increasingly also a coordination and cooperation of national programs. We have to say that. Now, some achievements and lessons learned. Well, this is a typical, everybody likes that if the budget increases. Yeah, also the annual budgets. I don't go into detail of that, don't be afraid. This is from Dan André, and I like it because it just shows the connections between different programs, where there are connections, but there are also newcomers, so I don't go into detail. I mentioned the evaluation culture, which is really something also national councils, agencies, and also governments can learn of. Yeah? And some achievements now from the from different evaluation studies. And this is interesting. I found this was still a typewritten document from the communication of the Commission written by a typewriter, yeah, from '92. And you see that, on the one side, I don't go into detail, but on the one side you see the direct results with respect to science and technology, but on the other side also the very important structural effects. I mean, the framework program has an enormous impact on the fabric of science, research and technology in Europe. When you remember what I said at the beginning, because there was separate systems, no collaboration, only competition, only mistrust, yeah? And now we have really formed, it is every day, it is just mainstream, it's just clear, I know somebody in Portugal or in Finland who could contribute to that. I think this structural effect is important, and also the training effect, and this was seen already in the second framework, as you say. The training that people know how to work in distributed project, how to work together. And this is a competitive advantage, by the way. In other regions, there are quite some deficits, including the USA, and I could tell you even some documents about that. So there are some weaknesses, yeah. The degrees to which research results are exploited, this is still a challenge, no doubt about that. Also, closer involvement of users, and also, well, at that time, I think that has really improved the weight given to the improvement of human resources and the Commission administrative procedures. Yeah? That is always on the agenda. In my view, very often it is more a perception of reality, but we have to mention it today because today is also the birthday of Franz Kafka. So, another interesting aspect, and this is from the Oxford Conference, and this was from Brian Oakley. I'm not sure if somebody knows who Brian Oakley is. Brian Oakley was the director of the famous LV program in the UK, which was more or less quite some ideas of the framework program were inspired by the LV program. And he said, before the framework programs, if firms cooperated, they tended to look for partners in the US and knew little about even their competitors and virtually nothing about the work of academic institutions in Europe, except for those in their immediate purview. Moreover, many academic bodies did not seem to feel it was respectable to be seen working with industry, and certainly not to cooperate with other academic bodies. So I think it's very important to look at such things, and this is from '94, it is 20 years ago, and I think things have changed dramatically. There are also other points. A last point, the last bullet point I would like to emphasize, this is very interesting. Of course, again, the problem of exploitation. And he asked, Maybe there are the wrong people in the projects. There are not enough people with market experience, with market insight, just looking at research and development. And I can tell you, I was independent observer of health innovation calls last year, and I realized especially this point, so that very often scientists and researchers, both from industry, by the way, and from the academic field, have no feeling about, okay, what could be the impact, what could be the market, and this is something to remind. So I have other slides there, I will not show them. So, but some of the achievements now. Well, first of all, we can be proud about that the framework program is the largest collaborative competitive program worldwide, and it is open to the world. So unfortunately, time will not be enough. I would like to mention, but I would like to emphasize at this point that this openness is a real strength of the framework program. I mentioned that the global landscape of research and development is changing dramatically. New networks, new collaborative alliances are forged, and the framework program is an absolutely excellent tool to support these new alliances. And I'm absolutely sure, you can invite me in 10 years ago, that in 10 years the world will look different. Yeah? And investing in working with the emerging countries, especially I would say, would really be something. And I would really, without any doubt, support and fund this collaboration. So this is an advertisement. Yeah? So there is a high degree of additionality. It is about high quality research and development. The top people are participating there. There is a clear correlation between the growth of the framework program and the growth in high quality international co-publications within Europe. Participants, by the way, perform better than non-participating bibliometric terms, and FP attracts the best researchers, of course not all, but that are also the best in national funding schemes, and also it attracts more research-intensive companies. This is from a very important study by Eric Arnold on taking the long-term view. Now, lessons learned: cross-border pooling of public and private resources to achieve critical mass. We know that in the meantime, also, still some research is necessary about what means critical mass, but this is just a side remark. Making optimal use of complementary research and innovation resources for coping with complexity, especially addressing societal challenges. Another thing is collaborative research is a competitive advantage. I mentioned that, yeah? And there's a report from the US Competitiveness Council where they stress the deficits and the weaknesses of collaboration in the United States. But what is the benefit of collaborative research? It is because it is of an emergent nature. If you work together in teams, there is not only team cognition, but there is also inspiration and support for the emergence of new ideas. And you know, if you have a problem sitting in your desk alone in isolation, and then suddenly you find somebody to talk about, suddenly you have the solution. So it's an important, very subtle aspect. It strengthens excellence, we talked about that, also leveraging private investments, enhancing Europe's international competitiveness by joining forces and overcoming national orientation. But this is still an issue, and we have to work on that. And of course, and this is important for you, development of research services as a profession. So I'm afraid I have to close now because time is over. I have still some 50 slides, excellent slides, by the way, but I don't show them to you. Maybe you give me 2 minutes just on this basis of this slide to say some words about that. So are we really moving towards a single European market for R&D? I think we are moving in this direction, but still some joint effort is necessary. And I would really ask all of you to work to all the priorities that were defined in the ERA communication of last year. I cannot go into detail. European research area is really a must, and I hope that member states and stakeholders are wise enough to support the completion, or let's say a certain very important step towards next year. We are, as I said, in a global research and innovation landscape, and international cooperation is absolutely important. I have a very nice slide about interdisciplinary. I cannot show it to you. Yeah. The partnership, all these ERA initiatives, I support them. The joint technology initiatives, the joint programming initiative, but especially for the joint programming initiative, I think after 4 years of cooperation, of working on that, the commitment is still much too low. And I'm not so sure, and this is also supported by a recent evaluation, that the investment is really in line with what is now realized. It's absolutely important. Widening participation. I'm working with the new member states and also with neighboring countries since many, many years, even more than 25 years. I think there's a huge potential, but this needs not only a widening of participation, but also a widening of our awareness, of our mental landscapes. I don't want to make a test. Some of you, who of you knows the universities of Rzeszów, of Košice, of Jasz, of Miskolc, of Varna. There are very interesting happening there, but our landscape are still before 89. I think that's an important point. Synergies between framework program and structural fund, absolutely important, and also quite some challenges for EARMA to really now support, and its members, support the new approaches, integrated innovation. What does it mean for you? I think there's a lot to do. I want to finish with a remark I had from a director of the National Science Foundation in the US. I once had dinner with him, lunch, sorry, I have to be correct, lunch, and I asked him, I said, what is your opinion about the framework program? And he said, Manfred, we envy you. We don't have such a wonderful program. And I think we all should work together to further develop this interesting and absolutely key program for the next 30 years. And I believe that this will make an extremely important contribution to reaching the goals of 2020, and I very much hope that in 2020 we don't have to shift this goal to 2030. Thank you very much for your patience, and okay.